Hi everyone, my name is Sahil Chawla. I'm an MCAT tutor here at Shamasian Academic Consulting. Today we'll be going over a Psych-Soc passage, and I'll discuss some strategies you can use when encountering questions like these on the MCAT. Alright, so I got the passage pulled up here in front of me. Going to read through it. Going to discuss a outlining strategy, an analysis of, I'll discuss how to analyze the figures that are in a Psych-Soc passage as well, and then we'll go over the questions too. Just keep in mind that on test day you do want to be going at a pace of about 8 to maybe 8.5 minutes per passage so you can finish on time. But since I'm going to be walking through this and kind of thinking out loud, I'll be going a pace that's going to be a little slower than that. So for your independent practice, shoot for around 8 to 8.5 minutes. Alrighty, so let's jump into this. So let's start with the first paragraph. Recent studies have shown that television can adversely impact cognitive processes in both children and young adults. In previous studies, researchers found that in individuals ages 6 to 23, higher than average amounts of television watching lead to an 8 to 14% decrease in the ability of participants to quickly and correctly solve math problems. In addition, participants were less likely to recall list items or accurately identify emotions on a confederate during an in-person experiment. Alright, so looks like they're giving us some really key kind of preliminary information before we get into like a experiment. So they're talking about cognitive processing and maybe memory that can be impacted by watching TV. So to summarize this, I would go ahead and just write, I would put maybe TV can lead to, decrease math performance, right? Recall they mentioned, and they also mentioned emotional, or the emotion, whoops, there's an I in emotion, recognition. So I'm kind of using some shorthand here. I put, I kind of shorten recognition because I know what that means. And even though I kind of misspelled emotion here, I'm not going to worry about it because I know what it says. And if I know what it says, then that's all that matters. Don't try to have like a perfect summary. Don't get too fixated on writing the perfect outline or the perfect summary. Use this more as a tool to help you stay focused. But be mindful of the bigger picture here. We want to score well on this section, and that means we got to finish on time. So we can't waste a lot of time just trying to write the perfect summary and writing everything out all neatly. Sometimes you'll just have to come up with little shorthands and maybe even symbols and just put up with any misspellings or bad handwriting you might have along the way. But alrighty, I like that as my summary. Let's go ahead and move on to the second paragraph. A group of researchers is specifically interested in studying the effect of television on memory. The researchers recruit at least 50 participants in each of the following age groups: 6 to 8, 9 to 11, 12 to 14, and 15 to 17. Each of the participants watches 15 hours of TV per week, as confirmed by the participants themselves and a guardian. The participants watch a range of television programming throughout the week. Alright, so here it looks like they're now giving us kind of the information on the experiment that we're about to go into. So they mention here that the researchers were specifically interested in studying the effect of television on memory. So I know this is going to be our focus for the experiment here, is maybe what effect television has on memory. So to summarize this, I would put TV and memory, and maybe I'll say that's what the research is about. And they also did give us some information on the sample here, like there are 50 participants. These were the different age groups, and I would go ahead and maybe make a note for myself. They gave us some info on the sample. So if I have a question asking me about something about the sample, like what characteristics the participants had, I can look at my outline, see that I wrote for P2 or paragraph 2 that I put sample information. Then I'd go to paragraph 2 and find that specific information that I could use to answer the question. You can look at your outline kind of being almost a table of contents or a map that you can use to navigate through the passage when you have to refer back to it. So instead of having to dig through the passage first for information on the participants, I'll be having to skim through paragraph 1, 2, and 3. I would just look at my outline, see that, it's in paragraph 2, and I could jump straight to paragraph 2. It can just save a little bit of time. But I like this as my summary for paragraph 2, so let's go ahead and move on to paragraph 3. To conduct the experiment, the researchers split up the participants in each age group into group 1 or group 2. The group 1 participants watch 15 hours of TV a week for 3 consecutive weeks, weeks 1 to 3. At the end of the 3rd week, the participants are brought into a testing center and given a list of 20 names. 10 minutes later, they are asked to recall as many names as possible. The group 1 participants then watch 15 hours of TV a week for the next 3 consecutive weeks, weeks 4 to 6, and repeat the memory assessment. Group 2 participants follow an identical plan as Group 1 participants for weeks 1 to 3. However, during weeks 4 through 6, Group 2 participants are not allowed to watch any TV during the week. Group 2 participants complete the same memory test as Group 1 students at the end of week 3 and at the end of week 6. The results from the experiment are shown in Figure 1 for the 9 to 11-year-old age group. Okay, so specifically just for that age group. All right, so this paragraph is really got a lot there. You know, it's the biggest paragraph we have in our passage so far. So it might be a little tough to see, like, it might be tough for you to figure out how do I now condense this into a summary. Well, if you use kind of that table of content analogy that I mentioned here for what your outline could be, you could write something as simple as research design. So that way, when you need to, refer back to what was kind of the setup of this experiment, if a question, needs you to know that, you can then just see that, okay, this is where that stuff is mentioned, so I'll just jump straight to paragraph 3 and read through there. If you want to take some more notes, you could write specifically what was going on here, where they had you could put maybe for group 1, it was 15 hours for weeks 1 to 3, and then there was a test, then again 15 hours for 4 to 6, and then there was another test. And then you could do the same thing kind of for 2, it was 15 for 1 to 3 test, because they had that memory assessment, then it was 0 hours for 4 to 6, and then they had, another test. So you could write something like that as well, whichever works for you. I'm going to leave it with just kind of research design, because reading through it, I do have a good understanding of what the setup was. Maybe if you didn't really understand how they set up the experiment, it would help to write it out like the way I had just done earlier. But since I feel like I got a good grasp of what the setup is, I'm just going to leave it as research design. All right, and then the last thing we have here is the figure. There's a really great method to analyze a figure, because when you first see a figure on the MCAT, you don't want to dive way too deep into it, because it's possible none of the questions will even refer back to it, or even if they do, they might not need you to go that deep into it. But at the same time, you still do want to give it a look, because this is research and this is information about the research that was conducted. So you don't want to neglect it. And a good balance between digging too deep and not reading it at all is the TADE-P method. I'll write this out here. You have TADE-P, and TADE-P stands for title, axes, independent variable, dependent variable, and a pattern. So that way you can kind of get like a high yield overview of whatever figure you're looking at. So for our title, we have this here. So this is the memory test performance for 9 to 11-year-old age group. For our axes, we have, the groups and their, group 1 or group 2, and then the number of names that were recalled during that memory assessment test. So our independent variable is basically whether you're in group 1 or group 2. So your independent variable is the hours of TV that was watched, because that's the difference between the two groups, right? Group 1 watched 15 hours of TV per week for weeks 1 to 3 and for weeks 4 to 6, whereas group 2 did the 15 hours for weeks 1 to 3, but then they did 0 hours a week for weeks 4 to 6. So the number of hours TV watch would be your independent variable. So maybe we could write that down here. Hours of TV. All right, and your dependent variable is then going to be the number of names that was recalled. So we could just we'll just put memory here, but really specifically it is this number of names that are recalled. And now let's look for a pattern. Well, quick glance, I see this is about the same. So that week 3 test, when the conditions were identical for both groups, looks like they performed basically the same. But when I look here at week 6, group 2 is way higher than group 1. So it seems like the pattern here is that Group 2 outperformed Group 1 after not having watched TV after that weeks 4 to 6. When they took that week 6 test, they outperformed Group 1. Alrighty. So we've read through the passage. We've given it we made up our outline. We've dug a little into the figure and got a good understanding of what happened, what the results of the experiment was. So let's go ahead and now just dive into the questions. All right. So question 1: in a follow-up study, researchers found that participants are best able to recall names at the end of the list better than names at the beginning of the list. This is known as, and they give us recency effect, proactive interference, primacy effect, and retroactive interference. All right, so this is pretty much a straight content knowledge question, asking you, just testing if you know your terminology here. The recency effect, let's see. So the recency effect refers to the fact that you tend to remember things at the end of a sequence better than, maybe like in the middle or earlier on in a sequence. And that lines up perfectly with what the question stem is asking. So looks like A is going to be our correct answer here. But let's look through B, C, and D as well to make sure that none of those work out as a better answer. B, proactive interference. This is a phenomenon where like old information, right? You have like old info that you have in your head kind of just prevents you from remembering some newer information. Maybe a good example of this would be, when the calendar changes and it's a new year, maybe that first week or two, you might have a habit where you're accidentally writing the previous year. So it just turned 2021. That first week of January, you might have mistakenly still been writing 2020 when you were writing down the date. So old information inhibiting new information, not really what the question stem is looking for. So B is not correct. C, primacy effect. Primacy effect is kind of like the opposite of the recency effect. Primacy effect is saying that you remember words or something in a list or a sequence that's at the very beginning. So you remember the stuff at the beginning better than stuff that's in the middle or at the end. So that kind of goes as the exact opposite as what the question stem is asking. So C doesn't work. And D, retroactive interference, that's basically the opposite of answer choice B, where you have new info, the blocking maybe or making it hard to recall old information. So you move somewhere, you've now lived there for 10 years, let's say, and then it's hard for you to remember what your old address was from maybe like 10 years ago. So that doesn't really work with what our question stem is asking. So yep, A is going to be our best answer here. All right, let's move on to question 2. Which of the following do the researchers not account for in the study? So intergroup variability, amount of TV watched, genre of TV watched, age. Quick little tip. It's really easy to overlook things like not, most, least, some or except. When they have these words there, it can be helpful to just maybe kind of highlight it, or on your like actual test page, maybe highlight the word not. The MCAT it's an exhausting exam, so it's really easy to make mistakes like that. So I would go ahead and just, maybe highlight not, just so you can really emphasize to yourself, I'm looking for which one of these does not account for, is not accounted for in the study. So A, intergroup variability. So this was controlled in the experiment, because what they did is they made sure that first week, or that first memory assessment test that occurred, was after both groups 1 and 2 were in the same conditions, right? They mentioned group 2 participants follow an identical plan to group 1 participants for weeks 1 through 3. So if it happened that, all of the group 2 participants, like, they're made up of people that generally just have a very above average or strong memory, like just by random chance that just happened, we can make sure that doesn't occur by first seeing how do they perform under identical conditions. So if group 2 was just made up of people that were all just very gifted with memory and recall, then we would have seen right here that this would be a lot higher, that group 2 would have already outperformed, and we would have known that we need to rebalance our groups a bit. So they made sure to control for that. So A, not really, that's controlled for, so that is accounted for in the study. B, amount of TV watched. Yep, this was accounted for. They mentioned that In both groups, that there's 15 hours of TV per week from 1 to 3, and then in group 1 it was continuing 15 hours per week for weeks 4 to 6, but group 2 was 0 hours. So that was something they did account for. We can eliminate B. C, genre of TV watched. Don't believe this was accounted for, because we can see here the participants watch a range of television programming throughout the week. So doesn't seem like they were making them just watch a specific genre, such as like, okay, everyone, you are now just watching science fiction. Instead, they're letting them watch a range of television programming. So C doesn't seem like the right answer. It seems like it is the right answer because it is not accounted for in the study. D, age. They mentioned here that they were split up into different groups, different age groups. So yes, that also was accounted for. And so of course, that leaves us with C, making it our best answer. All right, 2 more questions to go. Let's look at question 3. Which of the following conclusions is not supported by the results shown in figure 1? All right, A, group 1 participants and 2 participants recall a similar number of names when they watch 15 hours of TV a week. B, retroactive interference prevents group 1 participants from performing as well as group 2 participants on the week 6 test. C, the ability of group 2 participants to recall names improved on the week 6 test. D, the number of names recalled by participants is associated with time spent watching TV. All right, again, we have not. So we're making sure that we're looking for something that is not supported by what we see in figure 1. So A, we have group 1 and 2 participants recall a similar number of names when they watch 15 hours of TV a week. Yes. When the first memory assessment test occurred, that was after both groups had watched the same amount of TV per week, which was 15 hours. So that is supported by figure 1, so we can eliminate that. B, retroactive interference prevents group 1 participants from performing as well as group 2 participants on the week 6 test. This is a little tricky because when I look at this here, that week six test, group 1 did not perform as well. That is true. But was it due to retroactive interference? That seems like a little bit of a leap. I'm not sure if we can make that conclusion. I don't think we have enough info in our passage or in the figure to conclude that it's retroactive interference that was causing the weaker performance in group 1. So I don't really like this answer. I do like this answer, but I don't think this is supported by figure 1. But let's look at C and D as well. C, the ability of group 2 participants to recall names improved on the week 6 test. Yep, week 6 test, group 2, way higher compared to when they did it during the week 3 test. So that is supported. D, the number of names recalled by participants is associated with time spent watching TV. I like this. They say associated with, so they're not like necessarily saying that it was directly causing it. This is a more safer way of interpreting the data here. Rather than saying watching a lot of TV caused it, they're saying there seems to be an association between watching more TV and diminished recall, right? So I think this is supported by figure 1 because if we look here, again, in the week 6 test, group 2 now watched less TV and their performance was higher compared to group 1 and versus, them from a few weeks ago when they were watching more TV. So D seems to be supported as well. So B is our best answer. Last question. Which of the following best describes the type of study described in the passage? A, observational study. B, experimental study. C, case study. D, survey study. All right, so also very content focused. You got to make sure you know your research designs and the different types of studies that can be conducted and how exactly they differ from one another. So A, observational study. These are going to be studies that involve observations, but there's no manipulation of like an independent or dependent variable. In our experiment here, or in this study that was conducted, the researchers are actively manipulating an independent variable and then measuring their dependent variable, right? So that independent variable was the amount of TV watch, right? Hours TV watch. And then they're seeing And they're manipulating that, right? They're telling group 1, you have to watch 15 hours of TV per week. And then they're telling group 2, watch 15 hours first. And then the second phase of the experiment, then you're doing 0. So they're actively manipulating that independent variable. And what they're then looking at is how does that impact our dependent variable, which is memory, or specifically, the number of names they're able to recall. So that doesn't really fit with observational studies, because observational studies, again, they don't really involve manipulation or an intervention from like the researchers. So I don't like A. Now, experimental study, that lines perfectly with what I just said, that the researchers actively manipulate independent variables and measure the dependent variable. That is exactly in line with what we would expect with an experimental study. So I like B, and of course, as usual, we're just going to keep on reading and make sure that C and D aren't better answers. C, case study. A case study is going to be more like where you're getting some detailed information. You're collecting information on just one participant, or maybe a very small group of participants, and that isn't really what's going on here. Again, this still feels more in line with something like an experimental study. So case study might be like, let's say, an interesting patient is admitted with a very rare, never before seen disorder, or they're expressing some very odd symptoms that, again, hasn't really ever been seen. So a case study might be done on them to just learn more about what all is going on there, and if maybe there's a new disorder that we haven't ever identified before, or something new might be here. But the key thing is a case study really has to do with one participant or small group of participants, and not so much of this actively manipulating an independent variable like we're seeing in our study. So I would eliminate C. Now D, survey study. So these basically are going to be involving a questionnaire or a survey where these are given to participants and they respond and give them back to the researchers, and the researchers then analyze the responses. There wasn't really any survey or questionnaire presented here to the participants. This is still seeming like it's more like B, our experimental study. So I would eliminate D, and B is our best answer. Alrighty, so that's going to wrap things up for us today. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, comment if you have any questions at all. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with our latest MCAT videos. And if you check out the link in the description below, you'll be able to sign up for our free MCAT question of the day, or straight to your inbox, you'll get a free MCAT question. Great way to start your day, and it's something I did during my prep even before I was here at Shemmassian. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Happy studying.